everybody, I'm Dave Thomas, and today I am building the Estes Shattered model rocket. This is part of their E2X line, and it goes together fairly quickly. So you should be able to build this in an hour or less, and it will be ready to launch soon after. So let's go ahead and open this up and take a look inside. So go ahead and find your instructions here, and we'll have a parts list. Okay, so we have two pre-finished body tubes, a sheet of self-stick decals. We have a small parts bag that contains the parachute, the shock cord, the payload bay bulkheads and nose cone, and then also a reinforcement for the launch lug. And then in a separate small parts bag we have the fin can and the fins and some sleeves here that will also go on the payload bay. So it looks like we have everything we need here. I'm going to clear things away and we will get started. Now I'm going to do this a little bit out of order. I'm going to skip putting the launch lug on for now, and then assemble the fin can here, and then while the glue is drying on the fin can, I'll go back up and do the launch lug while the glue is drying. So first, start with the fin can here, and it's a good idea just to line everything else up. So look for those two little nubs there, and those will help align this one put together. Alright. Now we will have to glue this, but first just go ahead and put it together and make sure nothing's preventing that from closing all the way, or nothing's sticking out or blocking something. Okay, and then you can use either some tube type plastic cement or some brush-on type plastic cement. Either one will work. I kind of like the brush-on one because it gives you finer control. And definitely do this with something protecting your work surface. In this case, I'm just using my instructions. Alright, but we're going to go through here and hit the areas that have the actual nubs on them there. And just inside. Alright, we don't want to get into this inside space because that's where the fins go. But you can go ahead and do this area up here where it will insert into the body tube, and down here only do this if you've got the brush on. You can go ahead and do the threaded areas, but don't get it in the threads. Alright, the tube type cement is really hard to do that without gumming up the threads. Alright, then we're just going to put this back together once more. Alright, and hold that firmly for about 60 seconds before setting it aside to dry. Now for the launch lug, we're going to take one of the two body tubes here, and this will be the one that will be the aft body tube where it has the engine mount and everything attached to it. And I'm just going to write on the inside here that this is the aft end. So, okay. Now they have us draw a line on this using a door frame or a straight edge. And I'm going to use this. This is a tube marking guide, also made by Estes. If you don't have one of these, fine, just use a door frame, but it's a lot easier to get this under a camera than a door frame is. Okay, and we need to make a mark here before we even do this at 3.5 inches. Now you can just draw a line on it like they show, but I prefer to do as little erasing afterward as possible. So there's 3.5 inches, okay, and then we're going to need a line that is as long as the launch lug. So if I put this on here, I'm going to go ahead and use American units. Alright, so that's going to add another 2 3/4 inches. So if I add that to 3.5, now I got to find my mark again. Here it may actually be easier to see it if I use a Sharpie. Okay, and then 2 3/4 beyond that is going to be about here. Alright, and that's really where I need my line. So instead of drawing the whole line across there, I can just do it between those two marks, and that will give me a place to line up for my launch lug. Okay, so that will be covered by the launch lug when we put this on. Now I'm going to take the launch lug here, and on the underside it's got these two projections here. So I'm going to put this over the line. Okay, and what we want to do is have those nubs both on the line there. So you might want to take it to the side first. And now I'm going to press, not too firmly. Alright, so we don't want to collapse the tube, but what I'm trying to make are two little indentations here. And it looks like I need to try, I can see one. So when you've got your indentation, you're going to put a little cross cut on that. Alright, and so I'm going to go ahead and put this back on. And I'm going to put the little nub in that cross cut. And I'm going to try it again up here. My indentation was not showing. Alright, I can feel it. Alright, so I can go ahead and just put in a single cut there to make sure it is where I think it is. There we go. Okay. And make a cross cut on that one as well. Alright, now I'm going to put them both back on there. So one nubbin in each hole, and they should line up. Okay. Now you can go ahead and widen that hole a little bit if you like. A pencil tip works really well for this, especially a old-fashioned wood pencil. Right, now we've got some real holes in that, and I can put this back on. Alright, this seems like a lot of work to get that launch lug on, but where we have two dissimilar types of materials, you want to make sure everything fits as flushly as possible. Okay, now in the instructions they recommend using tube type plastic cement for this, and that will work. I actually prefer to use a gel type of super glue, so either one of those will work. Alright, and first of all I'm just going to put a drop in each hole here. Okay, and then they show putting the glue onto the tube and mushing down the launch lug into that, and you can do that. I actually prefer to put it on the launch lug so I can tell better where it's going to squish out to. Alright, so I'm just going to put some on the nub here and right around it. Try not to get glue in the holes there, because that could interfere with proper function of the launch lug. Okay, and then same thing over here. Alright, and I'm going to put that back in the holes. And I just hold that down firmly, but don't squash the tube. And so if you get this all perfect, you won't see any glue coming out around the launch lug there. Okay, I'm going to set this aside to finish drying and come back to the fins being installed on the fin can. At this point, we're ready to install the fins. So the glue is dry on here, and before I put the fins on, I'm just going to test fit the motor retainer here and make sure that nothing got into the threads that's going to cause interference. Alright, and that looks fine. If you do happen to get some glue into the threads, you can usually gently cut it away using a hobby knife. Okay, now before we put any glue on these, I want to test fit them. And this is why you want to have your fin can completely dry, because if you don't, it may split apart while you put the fins in. Okay, so those all fit and they're relatively tight, and this is going to help me determine which way to put them on. I'm going to show you both ways, so that was a fairly easy one to do. This one at the seam here probably got a little bit of cement down inside. It's a little bit harder. Okay, so the way they show this is using tube type cement and applying it to the fin first. Okay, and this is a little bit unusual for them. Usually they apply the glue to the fin can instead. Okay, but either way will work. I'm going to use the brush on cement just because I get more control with it. And I'm going to show you a couple of ways to do this. Alright, actually I'm going to show you 3 ways that you can put the fins on, and they all work to about the same extent. So what they're showing here is putting glue along the base of the fins like this. And if you're using the brush on cement, you may have to do it, make a couple of passes, as it dries really quickly, and sometimes it dries before you get it ready. Alright, and so for this, I'm going to put it on this one. And so after your glue's on, you put it in and very quickly shove that all the way up. Okay. Now the drawback to applying the glue first in either of the 2 methods I'm showing you, so this was putting it onto the fin, is sometimes it grabs. And it especially happens if you've got a fin right along a seam here that you've glued together. Okay, so I'm going to use the other non-seam side here. So another way to do this is instead of applying it to the fin, you apply it to the fin can itself, where the fin is going to come down. Okay. Ran a little bit there, but this stuff you won't see it after it dries. Okay, and the same way you want to be really quick about this. So put it in, slide it up, and you're done that way. The third way is to mount the fin first. Okay, and this I prefer to do if it's a really tight fin like this one is, that just doesn't feel like it's going to cooperate well. Oh, I just broke open the fin can. Okay, so it wasn't quite dry as I thought. Alright, better that it happened now though. Okay, so that finally got up there. But that one I'm pretty sure if I had done one of the other 2 methods would have stuck to it. So here instead I put the fin on first and then add the glue, and you have to have the brush on stuff for this. If you try this with tube type cement, it almost always makes a big mess. But this way the glue gets drawn into the seam between the fin and the fin can by capillary action. And in my experience, it's just as strong, at least for everyday use, as putting the glue on the fin or the fin can first. Alright, I'm going to do the same thing with this one since it's also on a seam. And the reality of this is actually, as long as your motor retainer is in place, you don't even have to glue the fins. Because with the motor retainer in place, and I'm going to do this briefly, it actually blocks the fins from coming back off. I'm going to take that back off just in case I had some stray glue. Okay, now here you can also at this point take either tube type or brush on type cement and come in from the back side of the shoulder here. And you don't want to go all the way down the fin can, just at this top part of the seam, and that can just strengthen it a little bit more. Alright, I'm going to let this dry for a few minutes before we install it into the tube and come back to the tube here. Alright, inside the small parts package that contains the recovery system, there is what looks like just a clear sticker. Okay, this is actually a reinforcement for the launch lug. And I'm going to bring my little stand up here again so it doesn't roll on me. Alright, and you don't want to just slap this on and say we're done. The idea here is to center it on the launch lug. Okay, but don't just press it down right away. Press it down in the middle, and that got a little bit crooked going on, which is why you don't want to press the whole thing on all the way. It's easier to change the placement if it's only on the plastic. Once it hits the paper, it becomes pretty permanent. There we go. Alright, so now take your fingernail and wrap that down around the edge and use your fingernail to actually drive it into that edge there. And then do it on the opposite side, same thing. And now smooth the rest of that sticker in from the center outward. Okay, and this just gives more strength for the launch lug, so if you get a gust of wind on the launch pad or something like that, it doesn't tear the launch lug away. Okay, our last task involving the fin can is mounting it to the body tube. Now make sure you've got the aft end of the body tube. See, that's where I marked it there. And for this you can use either the tube type plastic cement or the gel type super glue. The runnier types of both types of cement don't work well because they just get absorbed into the cardboard here and don't form a good bond with the plastic. Alright. And I found for binding to dissimilar surfaces like plastic to cardboard, the gel type super glue actually works the best, unless you want to get into using epoxy. Alright, but form a nice even bead all the way around there. It doesn't need to be heavy, but you do want it even, as it works best if you don't have any air gaps in it. Okay. Now the placement of the fin can really doesn't make any difference, but you do want to align it so that the launch lug is between two of the fins. So now I'm just going to put this into place. I'm going to rotate it a little bit here, and then come back and center between two of the fins. All right, and that grabbed really quick, faster than I'm used to it doing. Okay, it's not perfectly on center, but it clears the fin, and that's mainly what we want to do here, is make sure that the launch rod does not run into a fin. Next we're going to assemble the upper tube, and in the parts list they call this a payload bay. But looking at the instructions, everything's permanently attached to it, so you couldn't actually open it up and put a payload in there. Okay, so if you follow the instructions here, all of these tubes and all of these bulkheads get glued together, and the clear just becomes a decorative item. I'm going to show you here also how to modify this so that the clear section can be a payload section. Okay, so go ahead, first of all, we'll start with this. And here again we're gluing dissimilar surfaces, so you can either use the tube type plastic cement or the gel type super glue. Okay, and the first thing you're going to do is take one of these bulkheads here and we're going to attach a sleeve to it. And this part should be permanent. And this one will go between the payload section and the lower body tube, the aft body tube. Alright, so just get a medium amount all the way around, and this is going to fit on just like this. Okay. The way they show it, you do this twice. Okay, so both of the plastic bulkheads here should have a sleeve on them. Now if you just want to build this like it shows in the instructions, then go ahead and glue these two together in the same way that you did the first one. Okay, now I'm going to set that aside for a moment. This is the one that got glued. And so for it, it's going to go into the aft end of our payload section here, like that. Alright, now regardless of whether or not you're going to build it according to the instructions or as a payloader, this part is going to be the same. So once again here we're going to put a bead of glue right along the inside. Alright, then we'll insert the bulkhead, kind of turn it as we go up until it reaches that point, and we'll let that dry. Alright, if you're going to build this in the same way, you'll repeat that with the other end and the other bulkhead. Now, if, however, you want to do this a little bit differently, alright, then what you're going to do is mount it like this without the sleeve. Now, we will need the sleeve. Okay, basically what you're going to do is mount it in this direction instead of this direction. Okay, and then this will get glued up in here. Alright, if you're doing it according to the instructions, this part would be on here, and that whole thing would get glued in here. Okay, and then this would become the forward end of the rocket. So I'm going to make mine as a usable payloader. So I'm going to come back here and go ahead and apply some glue to this. Alright. Push that on. Now again, in this case I want to put this part into the forward body tube up to that point. Alright, now in this case we're gluing cardboard to cardboard. You could use the gel type super glue, but in this case you get a better bond with either white glue or wood glue. Okay, and you're just going to put an even bead in here. Doesn't have to be really heavy. In fact, that's probably more than I need there. I'm going to just use a finger, smush that about. Okay, then I'm going to insert this right up to the plastic. Okay, so now when this goes together, it'll go on like that. Now I will probably need to put a little bit of tape on this because it's not quite as tight as I'd like it to be. Okay. Something else you can consider is taking some tape or a little piece of vinyl and blocking the hole underneath the eyelet there. Now we need the eyelet open because that's where the shock cord is going to attach, but that hole could allow exhaust gases to get up into your payload section, which in turn could pop off the front of the rocket, and this would fall without a recovery system. So this needs to have a good friction fit, and we want to block exhaust gases from coming up through there. And you can do this in a couple of ways. You can just use masking tape if you want to. And like this. This does require some small fingers sometimes. Alright, but just like that, okay, there's not going to be a lot of pressure on that, but that will prevent exhaust gases from getting up inside there. Now if you're building this in the decorative way that they show here, you don't need to worry about that because everything's glued together. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry. Up here on the other end, we're going to glue the nose cone into there. Alright, really simple. And again here I'm going to use the gel super glue, but you could also use the tube type plastic cement. Alright, and just twist it as it goes in to distribute the glue well, and let that dry as well. Next we need to install the shock cord, and the shock cord mount is printed here on the front page of the instructions, and so you just need to cut this out. If you don't want to destroy your instructions, you can just make a photocopy of the front page there and cut that one out. But here you can use either scissors or your hobby knife. I actually cut through both layers there, but that's alright. Okay, so once you've got this done, I'm going to move the instructions out of the way. Take the shock cord mount, and then lay the shock cord along it. Now the instructions show going straight down like this. I actually prefer to go at an angle, because when this folds up, this part of the shock cord will fold up over the next. And if you allow it an angle here, it'll lay down beside it rather than right on top where it takes up more room. So I'm just going to take a bead of wood glue here. White glue works as well. Do not use super glue or plastic cement for this part. Okay, then I'm just going to lay my shock cord in there, and I'm going to spread the glue all around here, because what we want is a sandwich of paper and glue and the shock cord without a bunch of air bubbles in it. Okay, so I'm going to take the one, fold that up onto the two, and then the 2 up onto the 3. Again, this is where I can allow the shock cord to lay against itself rather than be on top of itself here. Okay, and so we're going to squish this flat as much as we can, and then we're going to impart a curvature to it like this. Alright, next we're going to add some more glue to the outside of the curve. Next we're going to add more glue to the outside of the curve. Doesn't need to be heavy, but again you want it to be uniform. So we want to get a nice even coating here all the way across. And go ahead and bend the curvature back in if you need to. And then this is going to go into the forward end of the aft body tube. And it needs to go back at least 1.5 inches. So as I have it here, the glue is facing up, and I'm just going to push this back, and then I'm going to turn it over so that now the glue is facing down. Okay, straighten out the shock cord, and then I'll push that down as far as I can with my finger, and then press it against the inside of the body tube and against my hand, so that I get that as flat as I possibly can. Okay. Now you can go further than 1.5 inches, and in fact I prefer as deep as I can possibly get it. But if it's above there, you may run into a problem of the recovery system bonking up against the nose cone, and that may cause recovery problems. Alright, set that aside to glue for a little bit. And next we're going to do the parachute. Alright, so it comes in its own little package here. Go ahead and open that up. Now, for the most part, Estes parachutes are all pre-assembled. You just have to attach them. So go ahead and open this up. Alright, this is an 18-inch parachute, which seems a little bit big for this rocket, but we'll go with it. Alright, gather up all of the loops here onto a finger. Now this is going to get tied to the base of the payload section. Okay, so rather than the nose cone here, alright, so find the middle of the parachute sheet, and then you've got the loops on the other hand, and now you just adjust the relative lengths of those loops until you get all those corners coming down in about the same spot. They may not be identical, alright, but they should be close. Alright, once you've got that, then take the loops here in your hand and thread these through the eyelet of the payload section there. Okay. And then according to the instructions, what you're going to do is pass the entire parachute through. Okay. And then as you tighten that, it's going to form a knot around the eyelet there with your shrouds. Now, I have two problems with this. One is that while you're doing this, the relative lengths of the shrouds may change. And then two, it's permanent. Alright, so I'm going to pull this back apart. Now you can do this if you want to, but with an investment of about 25 cents worth of hardware, you can do this another way. My personal preference for attaching parachutes is to use a snap swivel like this one. Now they come in different colors and sizes and such, but this allows you to quickly change parachutes, and the swivel itself helps keep the shroud lines from tangling up as bad on its way down. So I'm going to come back to my chute here, once again find all my loops, alright, and wrap those around my finger as I did before, and also then grabbing the parachute by the center, alright, realign all those corners, and now I'm going to put the loops through, and throughout this I'm keeping at least 2 fingers on the shroud line so they don't change their relative length to each other. And now the loops here I'm going to pass through the swivel end of the snap swivel. Okay, just like that. And these don't have to open as far. So now I'm going to reopen that loop, and instead of passing the parachute through, I'm just going to pass the snap swivel through. So open that up, pass the entire snap swivel through. Alright, and then pull those loops down around the swivel end again, and then pull it taut. Alright, and that's going to form a knot here. You have to pull them in. There we go. Okay. Go ahead and recheck your corners. Alright, if they're acceptable to you there, then take just a little dot of white glue or wood glue and stick it on that knot. And then just work that in. And this will just keep the knot from coming undone and changing the relative lengths of the shroud lines. So now you can take the payload section, or if on any other rocket it would be the nose cone. Alright, but open up the snap part, clip that on, and then close it once more. Okay. The actual size of the snap swivel really doesn't matter. For most model rockets, even the smallest ones, are more than able to handle the stresses of deployment and landing. What does matter is how big the snap is. So you want something that's going to move freely here on the eyelet. And this one is just about the smallest that I can put on here without it binding. So you don't want it to get bound up like down here or over here and things like that. That could interfere with proper ejection recovery. Okay, so now this can be folded up and stuffed inside the rocket just as the parachute would be otherwise. And our last piece to attach here is the shock cord on the other end, and this is simply going to tie on, and I'm going to disconnect the parachute here, because that's another advantage of that, is it gets it out of the way when you don't need it. Alright, here just tie a double knot into it, or 2 half hitches if you're a Boy Scout. Alright, and then pull that knot from both directions. So come up here on the long end, down here on the free end, give it a tug both ways. And what we're doing is cinching that knot down as tight as we can. Now we don't want to have the free end like this, because this can end up getting caught between the shoulder and the body tube and prevent proper ejection. So I'm going to cut that off at about 5 to 6 millimeters, or about 1/4 of an inch. Okay, so now that can't get in between there. And then just like the shroud lines, I'm going to put just a little dot of wood glue on there. Work that into the knot. And again, this is just to help keep it from unraveling. Now, to put everything together here, alright, first I'm going to attach the upper body tube to the payload bay. Okay, now if you glued this together, this part's already done. And here I'm going to add a little bit of masking tape so that it does not pop off sometime during the flight. Okay, and usually you can start with about half a circumference and then add to it. That's almost a full circumference, but I think it's going to need it. Okay. Yep, so that's nice and tight there, and that's what we want. If you don't want to be able to see the masking tape, you can use clear tape in there as well. The main thing is just make sure you don't have stickiness sticking somewhere that might make this permanent. Alright, and then we're going to reattach the parachute. There we go. Okay, now there are lots of different ways to fold a parachute, and if you ask any rocketeer, you'll get a different method. Okay, what I like to do is fold this into a triangle, take my shroud lines at about half their distance and just put them as a loop up into the parachute there. Fold the sides over the shroud lines, making a narrower triangle. Alright, fold that in half, and then fold the edges around, so that we get a nice tight cylinder there. And then the shock cord we can just stuff down inside. Now if you're actually getting ready for a launch, you want to put about 3 pieces of recovery wadding in before you do this step. But if you're just storing it, you don't need to worry about that part. Alright, and then we're going to put the cylinder here of parachute down inside on top of the shock cord. Just ease that down. All right, and then all of the remainder stuff here can go down on top. Now here again, we want to make sure that nothing's going to get in the way between the body tube and the shoulder of the payload section there. All right, now that's trying to pop out on itself. If I give this a shake, it comes out like that. To remedy this, we also turn to masking tape. All right, now again, start with about half a circumference here, because we do want this to stay in, but not so tightly that it can't be ejected. Alright, so now we'll try that once more. There we go. And now if I give this one a shake, it's not coming out, but it will pop loose if I put a little tension on it. And that's what we want. Alright, so once more, go ahead and put everything back inside, making sure that nothing's getting caught between the shoulder and the body tube. Okay, and then you would put a motor in here if you're ready for launch. If you're just storing it, don't store it with a motor in it. But the motor goes in like that, and then the motor retainer screws on top. Alright, so that retains that motor nicely there. Now I'm not actually storing this, so I'm going to take that back out. And the last thing we need to do is install the decals. Now this is perfectly capable of flying without decals. Those are artistic effects. If you don't want to bother with decals, just go out and fly it. Now if we refer to the packaging, it shows the actual shattered decal going along here, and then the fin decals, of course, on the fins, and then it's got a couple of wraps here, and basically these are to hide the couplers here so you don't see them through the plastic there. Now there's no reason why you need to follow exactly their pattern here. So you could put the shattered decal up on the forward end, you could leave it off entirely, you could put the fin decals on the body tube, it doesn't matter. This is your rocket, you do it the way you want to. Okay, I will show just a couple of these, how to put them on. Now this body tube is not a glossy finish at all, and so the adhesive on these decals is going to bind to it really, really quickly. So you want to have these placed right where you want them the first time. Now on the fins you have a little bit more forgiveness because it's a glossy surface and there's no paper to pick up. Okay, so for mine I want the shattered decal to be on the opposite side of my launch lug so that it will be visible when the rocket is on the launch pad. Okay, I'm going to kind of use my fins here as a guide for centering, and I'm going to bring this up, and I'm just going to barely touch it down, and even that is probably permanent already. Okay, but that looks to be straight enough at least. So once you've got that, go ahead and smooth down in the middle first, and then smooth out to the edges. And that will hopefully give you a minimum amount of air bubbles in there. Alright, and then I'm going to go ahead and do the wraps here. Now these are going onto the plastic, so they're a little easier to reposition if you need to. If I can get it off, there we go. Alright, so I'm going to start these, well, this will move, so it doesn't matter where I start them really. Okay, but I'm going to try and get it centered over the sleeve, because that's what you're going to see mostly. Let's see, here I can pick it up and lay it back down again. Okay, Now that, I don't know if you can see that, but that's actually down on the body tube there. And I don't want that because one, it looks weird, and two, it might actually cause the payload section to stick to the body tube when ejection goes off, and we don't want that. So I'm going to start this just a little bit higher and replace it. Okay, and as I said, you can do this when you're doing it on plastic. On this body tube, though, it would lift off the finish, and you don't want to do that. Okay, so there's one of them. Now on mine, since I set it up as a payloader, I'm not going to be able to hide the entire bulkhead there. If you did it as the directions indicate, then you'll have the other sleeve here, and that should be hideable. Okay, and I'm just going to do those for now. So this went together fairly quickly. I hope you had a fun and easy time building it. Have a great launch, a safe recovery, and please stay tuned for more of my videos.